So welcome everybody to Thursday Book Club. For anyone who doesn't know me, and I think most of you are familiar today, my name's Suzanne Leal and I'm the author of novels The Deceptions and the Teacher's Secret and Border Street. As you all know, this book club started during COVID as a way to connect readers online, and we've been going for 2 years, which makes my heart sing to know that we've created such a firm little group, and it's all pretty relaxed, so people can come and go as they like, come in late, leave early. The idea is just to have it as relaxed as possible. We have a guest writer once a month, and tonight I'm delighted to have Wendy James as my guest. Wendy is a prolific Australian writer of novels including The Golden Child and The Accusation. Her latest novel, and that's the one that we'll be focusing on, is A Little Bird. What I might ask everybody to do is just to mute so we can get a clear recording.
Do I? No, not me.
Excellent. Welcome to you, Wendy.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here, Suzanne, to meet your lovely
You're coming to us from Newcastle.
Yes. Cooks Hill, which is close to the inner city of Newcastle. Yeah.
And how's the week been for you so far?
Yeah, good. Very uneventful, really. Work, walks, lots of walks, a bit of sunshine, a bit of rain.
I think uneventful has become something good. I think really the curse "may you live in interesting times" has taken on a new meaning in the last couple of years. So congratulations on your uneventful.
Yes, thank you. I run I have a writing group that comes on Wednesday nights, and we've just had somebody sick every week for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, and we finally had a sort of almost full house. So that was really lovely. So
When you say you run a writing group, how does that work? What's the setup? What's the structure of it?
I have 5 or 6 students who come, and they're all at different stages of writing. Some have published, and we discuss their work, and each week somebody's work we discuss, and then usually I give everybody some exercises based on probably something that I've, something interesting that I've seen in the work that we've been discussing. Yeah. And that's it's like a book group in a way. It sometimes does go in all sorts of directions, but it's always fun.
And so you choose someone every week, so it's someone's turn to be
someone's turn. Huh. Yeah, so they might have a short story or 10 pages of a novel that's in the process of being written. Yeah, but and they're at different stages, different genres. We've got children's writers, memoirs, everything. Yeah, it's fun. It's good.
And
especially nice to actually be able to do it. Nobody had COVID this week.
And do they become a close group? I mean, are they?
Yeah, they do. Like we've got new people, but there's people coming in and out. But there's people I've known now for years, and some of friends we've had for a while through children like you with your group too. So yeah, similar. Friends of friends, you all end up knowing each other quite well.
That's great. And do you enjoy teaching itself?
Yeah, I love teaching. Yeah.
What gives you the biggest buzz? I mean, when you've had a successful teaching session, what is it that most stays with you?
I think what you really enjoy is people going away having learnt something from something they didn't expect to learn something from. I mean, that sounds very long-winded, but you'll be doing a writing exercise that you can't really quite see the point of, and so they're writing something that they can't really see the point of either. It's not connected to what they're writing. It's completely different to what they'd ordinarily write. So perhaps you're writing something about a memoir, but something in that will actually teach them something about their own way they structure things, or a better way to characterize, or metaphors. We weren't looking at.
I think we're losing you a little bit. It's just a little bit it's a little bit unstable. I don't know if there's I think we'll just keep on going.
Yeah, okay. Sorry.
Got you back. Yeah.
I'll just check I've got the best internet on.
Sure. Look, while we're waiting for that, welcome to you, I think, Mascara. It's really lovely to have you today. We're a friendly group, and as you know today, or as you might know, today we're talking to Wendy James, who's a writer of many books, most recently this one, which is called A Little Bird. How are you, Wendy? Is that
yeah, is that better?
Yeah, that's fine. That's good. So, A Little Bird, Wendy, just so people who might not have read the book get an idea of it, we meet a journalist called Jo Sharp, and she's come back to the small town where she grew up. Tell me a bit about Jo. How would I recognise her?
So Jo's late 20s, early 30s, I can't even remember now, but she's left home a long time ago, wanting to escape the small country town that she grew up in. She has bad memories there, and because her mother and sister disappeared when she was a small child, but also just that feeling that she needs to get out to turn herself into somebody else and just find her wings. And she leaves and goes to the city, and of course it doesn't all work out. So she comes home, tail between the legs, to move back in with her father who's unwell and take a job in a newspaper that isn't quite the kind of journalism she'd hoped to do.
Although, coming from my week, which has been a bit of an up and down week, I'm not sure that that newspaper might not actually be the one for me at the moment.
No.
Tell me about what makes that newspaper particularly special.
The newspaper came from, I lived in country towns, obviously, as a young person, but I was looking at the Burke paper, and we lived out in Burke, and the Burke paper it was a very old newspaper. My great-grandparents lived there, and you can find the articles, when you go to Trove. It's very old, but it closed down, and then somebody bought it. It's this terrible thing when a small country town's newspaper closes down, because they're just such a repository of everything that's going on there. The social life, the commercial life, everything. But it closed down, and then somebody bought it and reopened it, and basically it was just a newspaper that reported pretty much lots of photos and lots of good news stories, and perhaps it was mostly online. And I just thought, wow, like that is actually, there's something very interesting about that. So you have a newspaper that it's not telling you, that everything was broken into and that these terrible things are happening to the town, which everybody's aware of in places like that. It's pretty clear, when people are leaving town. But it was a newspaper that just had the good stuff, what the kids were doing at school, what the school play was, what the grandparents' day at the school. There'd be photos of that, just the lovely things that people's real lives sort of are, the sort of happy day-to-day moments that make up people's lives. And so that's what I brought Jo back to, a paper like that, which she thought was a terrible thing, but of course turned out not to be so terrible. As you say, good news. It's good.
It's fun. Just before everyone came on, I was talking to Wendy about I must have been looking up the royal family. So, sometimes and I would call myself a Republican, but sometimes all you want to do is just look at Kate Middleton and what she's wearing and how she's smiling and what the kids are doing, and everything else in the world can just fade away while you're checking out what she's next opened, or if Charlotte's stuck her tongue out at somebody. And of course, as a result, my Facebook feed is almost entirely the royal family now. That's not good.
Suzanne Leal, arch monarch. Yeah.
In fact, I met Juliet Reeden, who's written a terrific book about the ghetto of Theresienstadt outside of Prague, which is one of my interests. But she's also the royal correspondent for the Woman's Weekly.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's how I know her name, right? Okay.
So she writes this sort of quite heavy stuff, and then she's out reporting on the latest royal togetherness. Anyway, so that's
I think that's a lovely job.
That's my good news feed, I think.
Yeah.
Small towns. So it's interesting. I didn't know that you're royalty really from Burke. I mean, you go back many generations. Is that?
Yeah. My grandparents left and went to Sydney in about the 50s. My grandmother had high blood pressure, and I think the heat was kind of a problem. So they moved there. And so then we stopped being Burke people, but my parents went back to run a shop, I don't know, for 6 years when I was a kid. So yeah, so we went back, and it was quite an interesting experience because I was a city kid going back to the country.
And what do you think sent your parents back to Burke rather than another small town?
Well, I think mostly that my grandparents had left their shop there, so they needed a manager. But I think my dad was quite an adventurer, so he was, you know, the first person. He'd gone to Sydney. Parents were still in Burke. He'd gone to Sydney to go to boarding school because he had to. There was no final year of high school, so they'd sent him off, and so he became sort of a city kid. And I think that was the push also for them to move down. And then I think he wanted to go back and, I don't know, find out, you know, whether he wanted to be there. And I think they had a lot of fun. I think in the 1970s, early 70s, it was a really fun place to be for young couples and young families. Well, depending what social class you were and whether you were, Indigenous people had a very different story to tell too.
It's interesting. I went to uni with a woman called Sarah Hopkins, who's I think spearheaded, or at least is one of the organisers of this Justice Reinvestment, which is a project to encourage, I think, Indigenous kids to become more qualified, to the extent of getting car licenses and to work the system. Which my understanding is it's been a pretty successful initiative.
Yeah.
What I was going to ask you about is for anyone who's reading particularly crime, but I think also Australian literature generally, small towns are really having their moment. Holly Throsby sends us back to the town of Goodwood. Chris Hammer is focusing on outback towns. And in A Little Bird, we're also going back to a small town. What is it that makes writing about small towns such good fodder?
Oh, well, I guess you just get that. You get everybody in a small space. And in a city, you're not necessarily going to see the people you've known all your life, like just when you go to the shops. So in a small town, you've just got everybody there. And all the tensions of generations are all congregated in one sort of geographical spot. I guess that is what the fun is. But I actually, a lot of people are writing about country towns, I think, in Australia. And I think a lot of it is really unrelentingly negative, and I did really want to do something a bit different. And I wrote the book in COVID, when kids, we weren't able to see our kids, and there was a whole sense that, you know, sometimes going home might be a good thing, and being with your family might be a good thing, even when you think it's not. And that the story sort of came from that. And so then I was thinking of the small town that you hate, that you go back to, and perhaps you work out a way to make a life there. And so that was something I really wanted to do, partly because we lived in Burke, but then when I was a teenager, we went and lived in a town called Wellington, which is out near Dubbo, and I married somebody from there. And I mean, my whole life is connected to that. He's actually Wiradjuri. So, you know, we've got all these tendrils out there, and I loved it. You know, he would never go back because he grew up there, but I was only there for a short period of time, and all of my memories of it are great. And so I wanted to do justice to that, you know, to say that these places have their good points. All that we hear about them is, you know, they're falling apart, everybody's unhappy, everybody's broke, businesses are closing, but people make good lives and happy lives in places like that too. And that's what I really wanted to bring out in this book.
So I'm interested about your husband. So you met your husband in Wellington, and I imagine you were both very young. Was that like a sort of childhood?
Yes. Yeah. So yes, about 17, and yeah. So
and you said he's a Wiradjuri man, is that right?
Yeah, so his family have Wiradjuri heritage. Yeah. I mean, they grew up, they're townies, and they weren't mission Aboriginal people. So in Wellington, it's an interesting town. It's everyone hangs together, you know. There's a lot of Chinese, Aboriginal. It's a really interesting community. Yeah.
And marrying your husband, did that give you an insight into the Indigenous community that you might not have had, or did you ever feel?
He's probably from a sort of a family that weren't necessarily talking about being Indigenous, or was sort of white passing, I suppose, for many generations. So that's part of the Wellington story as well. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. And look, I knew that we had something in common in terms of the fact that your husband, I think, is a police officer, or at least was.
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
And my husband's a criminal lawyer, and I sort of feel like that's quite they're both interesting careers in that you get access in that profession to people often at their lowest or at the most difficult, and you see something through. I mean, obviously as a police officer to perhaps to a prosecution, or perhaps not, and as a criminal lawyer to the end of a trial. Just being married to your husband, and when he would talk about his job generally, was that helpful to you as a writer?
It's been a very strange thing. He's actually hasn't been a cop for the last 15 years, but he I think at first I just thought I had a very naive view of crime and sort of thought, I don't understand why you have to be so nasty to the criminals, and why can't you just you do this without being violent and angry and throwing people in prison. And he was actually at King's Cross for 6 or 7 years, so that was interesting. And I learnt gradually that there was it's a very different world, and a world that we're protected from in so many ways. So I think that's what I learned most from him. There's sort of, I'm not really writing about, I am writing about crime, but I'm never writing about the sort of stuff that he was mostly dealing with, which is the day-to-day, just sad and terrible things that happen in people's lives. Mine, I suppose, in crime novels, you're often writing about the big crimes that seem to have come from somewhere else, but in the end they're not. They're just people's mistakes and people's stupidity that turns into something quite evil. Yeah, it's interesting. It's been interesting with his perspective and my perspective. They're not necessarily the same.
And I do think it's interesting. I know that amongst our book clubbers today, we've got writers and also avid readers, but I think something about hearing someone else's story, particularly someone who's close to you, it's helpful to be the observer rather than the protagonist. So I found when I was practicing criminal law, I perhaps didn't see the big picture as much as I think I can now, because there's something a little bit relaxing to be just on the periphery. Do you feel that?
Yeah, I do think that my perspective would always be, but why did it happen? And what are all the things leading up to it? Whereas for a policeman, that's not that interesting. What's interesting is stopping it, doing something about it, putting those people in prison because they've done it, and having them punished in a just manner. Whereas that's never my interest in a way. I mean, I don't think I've ever let anybody off the hook in any of my books, but it's not my main concern. It's more like, why are they doing what they've done, and how's it come to this, which is never the policeman's interest.
I think that's a good segue into your novel, The Golden Child. Can you just set the scene for this family that comes to the fore in that book?
So in The Golden Child, we've got a family, Beth and her husband, who've moved to Newcastle from the US. They're Australian, but they've been expats. They're quite nicely well off, moved back here for an engineering job, and for her husband. And they have 2 children, and life is pretty much perfect. They've got 2 lovely children. They're very bright. They're sent off to the nice grammar school. And the children are very good and well behaved, and then suddenly it all goes to shit, and the children aren't. One of the children, or 2 of the children, you don't really ever know. The children aren't as good as you think they are, and in fact one of the daughters is doing pretty terrible things to other children, and their life sort of falls apart. And what I wanted to look at in that book was, it was sort of looking at motherhood, and you have so many conversations. I've got 4 kids, and they're in 2 separate generations. So the eldest are 30 and the youngest are in there just coming up to 20. So many conversations with parents, and we're all trying so hard to do our best to make our children good people, and to be good parents, and to make their lives good, and to make them understand the world. And then I was thinking, well, what if you do all that? Because you talk to people and you know lovely parents, and they'd have these children who are just doing the most dreadful things. And you think, well, what is it? What if you're a mother doing everything right? You've been the most conscientious mother you could possibly be, and yet one of your children is really, really a bad seed. And so, yeah, that's where it came from. The terror of having the bad seed.
And because I read the book a couple of years ago, it struck me as one of the early books I'd read that focused really quite strongly on social media, almost collage-like. Was that an interest that you had?
Oh, yeah. So I think when I was writing it, my youngest daughter would have been about 15. It was just a constant pain, really, just caused constant drama. So, and she wasn't on the actual social media site that I used, which was one that I don't think they use anymore, but people would just be saying the most dreadful things about one another. And they didn't realize they were public. They didn't realize that people could see it. They didn't realize that they were hurting people, and you'd be hearing, terrible stories about kids suiciding, all sorts of things because of social media. And I guess that's when it all sort of started.
And it's really grabbed its audience, The Golden Child. You've just announced that it's being translated into French. My understanding is it's also been optioned for the film or for a TV series. Is that right?
Yeah, it's been optioned for a TV series. We're still not sure. It's been optioned twice, and so it's in what they call development. So we're waiting for it to go in production. But there's still a few months to go, and they've got good writers and all sorts of people. Disney actually have it, so we'll see.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. So it's not with an Australian production company. It's
no.
with Disney. So the Disney.
Yeah, it's the Disney.
It's exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, very exciting. It's Disney's. It's American ABC. So they are. I mean, Disney own a lot of things, I guess. So it's ABC, which is owned by Disney in the US. And the writer is a writer who has done stuff for Why I Met Your Mother. So that's exciting. Yeah.
And how did it come to that? I mean, how did the option come about? Because I think a lot of people might not know just how these things get brokered.
I have an American agent, and she sent it to a new agent with UTA, which is a film and talent agency in the US, and she read it and loved it. And then we actually, which was really exciting, so we ended up having two companies went to auction. So I had two film companies arguing over it or fighting for it, so that was really quite nice. So it was Sony and Temple Hill, who did Twilight.
And did they both want a TV series, or did one of them want a
TV? No, they were both interested in a TV series.
I can't help you with that on Mac.
Sorry, that's Siri.
Hello, Siri. Can she help me with my film deal?
I'll tell you a story about Siri in a moment before we turn to questions. But in terms of the two people who were optioning or wanted to option, was it always going to be a TV series? Or
they weren't talking about a film, although
And so they've got writers, which means you'd imagine they've got a pilot. Is that right?
No. So they wrote the first season, the first episode for the first season, and then they wanted a rewrite, but I haven't seen that yet. So we'll see. It's very exciting, but it's just you get kind of. I've had lots of options, and they just kind of, and lots of friends who've had options, and you see them kind of dissipate. So you try not to get too excited, but I am really.
And are you excited about the French translation as well?
Oh yeah, no, that was really fun. So they bought it maybe 3 or 4 years ago now, and it's taken a while to translate, but I've had lovely conversations with the translator. All the funny things that we say, and I can't remember any offhand, but we had some great conversations about what this really means and how you might translate it. And I'm looking forward to it. I did do French at uni, but it's very rusty, so I'm going to try and read it, maybe.
And so it's out after the French election, is that right?
Well, last time I wrote to them and said, when is the book coming out?
Although it's just out last year, haven't they?
They said, yes. You said, when we have a new president, and I said, things are very uncertain. And then I thought, I guess they meant the president, not a president of their book publishing. I think things can be quite fluid over there. But it's been done. The actual translation is done. I just don't know when it's going out.
Oh, well, let us know, because as we've said, we've got some French speakers amongst
Yes,
us.
I'd love to. I'd love to have someone to send the book.
That would be exciting. Now I'm going to open it up to any questions from our audience. No obligation for questions, but if you have one or two, this is your chance. What I might do is just get a show of hands. No, that's what I'm interested in at the moment as well, just while people are thinking whether there may be a question or not. What are you working on now? Are you someone that talks about the new work? Or?
Mind. Yeah, sometimes when you talk about them, they dissolve, but no, it's good. I'm actually writing something. It's not a sequel to The Golden Child, but it's still, I'm working again. I've gone back to young people and crime, because I find it really interesting. So I've got a teenage girl who's accused of burning her parents' house down and killing them, and she's been released, and a journalist working with her doing so that's I'm looking again at what perhaps makes people bad, if there is anything, but yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and young people.
I've got a question from Dina, and Dina's question is, can you talk about your writing routine, please?
That's very scatty. I used to, when I had 4 kids and all the time, in and out, and I used to think I've never got any time to write, and I'd be working. I've always worked part-time and waiting for my kids to grow up and leave so that I have all this time to write. And now I kind of do. I work a day a week out of home, and I do various small things. Most of my time I could be writing, and most of my time actually still not. So I still just write an intense, maybe 3 hours a day, and that's probably my max. I've worked that out, even though I used to think that wasn't enough, a couple of hours, but I still seem to be doing that, and I don't know how to change it. I could write for 12 hours a day some days, but I don't.
And do you start early? I mean, is it a particular time that you do it, or just when you find that
it used to be early when the kids, sometimes I went through a time of getting up really early and working for an hour before they got up, that sort of thing. But now it's I usually go for a walk, come back, have breakfast, and then sit down.
Yeah, excellent. Books. You've got some books to recommend to us. Which books?
Yes. Yeah, not crime novels at all, which is interesting. So I've had a kind of, I've read something that's relatively new. I read a beautiful book called Small Pleasures it's an English book by a writer called Claire Chambers, and I really recommend it. She's a beautiful writer. I recommend all her books. She's kind of, I don't know what you would describe her as. I think she's sometimes described as romantic fiction. I don't think she's that. It's comedy of manners or something. Small Pleasures is utterly unlike anything else I've read. It's about a woman in the 1950s who says she's a journalist investigating a woman who says she's had a virgin birth, and that sounds crazy, but it's not really about that. So I recommend everyone reads that. Just beautiful, gentle, funny writing. I've also been reading Barbara Pym. I don't know if other people, I'm sure she's a writer from the 1950s, another English writer, beautiful and funny, just funny. It's just interesting characters and gently funny. I mean, if you like Jane Austen, you'll like Barbara Pym. And the other thing I've just reread, and I didn't know that they were doing the new series, but I reread Persuasion for the 150th time. And so I'm recommending Persuasion as because new television series is so terrible. I think everyone should not watch it, and they should go and reread Persuasion, because it's so much better than the television series.
And which book by Barbara Pym?
Oh, Excellent Women is the one I've enjoyed most, I think. Yeah. They're very short. They're wonderful. They're just, wonderful writing, wonderful characters, a bit eccentric. You'll laugh. She's clever. It's that sort of observational comedy like Austen does.
Excellent. So Small Pleasures by Claire Chambers, Excellent Women by Barbara Pym, and Persuasion by Jane Austen.
Yes. Typical crime writing fare.
And just before we go, I've just got a little quiz for you. Can you give me a number out of 1 to 10, or number between 1 to 10?
7.
7. Okay. And we have a winner of our prize, which is mascara. Now, mascara, what we do once a month, we have a guest writer, and we have a special raffle, which is a bit of a bodgy sort of raffle, because
Good.
I get a number and I just count down the side until I get to number 7. And mascara, you are the lucky one. But what I'm going to have to do is, if you're happy to send me your address and just pop it in an email, you should have my email, I think, from the newsletter. Otherwise, I can, anyway, it's on my website. So just send me a note on my website, and congratulations to you. So, look, we're just a bit over time. We try and keep it to about half an hour so people can go and do something else, like, for example, watch the film The Little Death. Has anyone watched The Little Death? It's a bit racy, but really, really, really funny. In fact, it's the funniest thing I have seen in a long time. Written by Josh Lawson. I just sort of stumbled upon it. So I won't tell you too much.
They're all after funny at the moment.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I was looking for something funny, and all I could find was more murder.
Yeah.
But yeah, so maybe next week people can come armed with funny to watch and funny to read. Thank you very much for your. Oh, where can we watch it from, Dina? I think it might be Netflix. It's English. It may also be SBS. I think try Netflix. I was saying to Wendy beforehand, there's just so much choice. I get completely swamped as to where it all is, and normally just watch nothing at all. But thank you very much for your time, everybody, and thank you, Wendy. And we're excited about the French translation, excited about the optioning, and excited about this new book. So
thank you.
Watch this space.
Thanks,
Everybody.
Suzanne.
Have a nice
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.